Hey everyone, welcome back to today's video. Thanks again for tuning back in. Today we're going to talk about line management, some of the things that you can do that will not only make you a better and more efficient angler, but it'll save you a little bit of money, save you a little bit of time in terms of taking care of your line. It's really important that your line is in the best shape possible. Not only, like I said, will it help you catch more fish, but it also save you a bunch of money. Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app, which will help you select the best fishing places in the lake with features like the lake level, the current flow, the top baits tool, which will help you select the best baits for certain locations throughout the lake. Whether that's a clear water, stained water, dirty water, it'll choose the best bait for that location, provide you with all the information like what structure, what retrieve, different reel, all of the information that you need to catch the fish. This is in the app. The cool part about this app, though, is it's not just based on areas. It does provide you with specific tournament winning data that has been collected to help you figure out your best choices for baits and locations for whatever region of the lake it is that you want to fish. On top of that, not only does the app provide you with best locations, it gives you water clarity as well. So maybe you're on a lake like Lake Eufaula where there is a bunch of different water clarity located throughout the entire lake. This will help you identify the clearest portions as well as the dirtiest portions of the lake. Plus, the Deep Dive app has now added the wind effect map, which is going to take all of the different wind conditions for the past couple of days and show you what banks on the lake are being hit the hardest. They also have inflow points that show you different places throughout the lake where your water is being flushed into the lake through different ditches and creeks and rivers, providing you with high percentage places to fish and letting you know what parts of the lake are going to be the best areas after a rain. Check out the Deep Dive app to help you become a better angler. So the first tip that I want to talk about has to do with when you get on the water for the first time. Generally doesn't matter if it's, the first time in the morning from the day before, or maybe you haven't been on the water for a month. But one of the things is making sure that your line is straight. So in this case, I've got this rod and reel, I've got the bait in the bait keeper. So if I unhook it, what I see is relatively straight line. The issue isn't necessarily with that first, say, 10, 12 feet of line. It's when I start pulling line off. If that line has been sitting on the spool for a long period of time, what you end up doing is getting a bunch of memory. So right here, you can see how this line is straight because that was the line that was pulled out and along my rod. But then when you get down to the line that's on the spool, what you see is the memory. Well, what I like to do is take the first cast, and if I'm fishing a tournament, I'll do it before the tournament even starts, but I'll actually, take my rod, I'll fire my bait out there, about the length that I'll be fishing. And then you can do this a couple of ways. You can actually stretch your line. You can try to let your line maybe get stuck in some weeds and pull on it. Or you can just take your hand, and this is generally what I do, is I'll grab tight on my line and I'll just reel. And when I'm reeling, what's actually happening is this little bit of line right here is stretching. You can actually see how that's straighter than this line up here. So the key there is you want to stretch it. And the question you guys are probably asking is why? Why do you want to stretch your line? Well, the biggest thing comes down to sensitivity. If you have some of those coils in your line and say you're working a Texas rig or you're dragging a bait, that line will coil up and you will not have the same sensitivity that you'd have if your line was straight. So it can hurt you that first couple of fish of the day. Once you catch a fish or once you get snagged or once you put some pressure on it and that line straightens out, you're good to go. But more times than not, that first bite of the day, you're probably not feeling. And it's probably because you have a bunch of coil in your line. So that's one of the things that you definitely want to pay attention to. The next thing has to do with line twist. If you're using a technique where you have a bunch of line twist, I like to kind of do the same thing with respect to stretching my line, only I'll cut my bait off, I'll let a bunch of line out, and I'll just let my bait or my line untwist. I'll actually pull the line out, let it go behind the boat, and I'll just reel it back in, but that gets a lot of your line out or line twist out. You can let your line out, cut the bait off, let the line out, and then actually get on the trolling motor and pull your line for 50 yards or so. That will just untwist it. It's a really good little tip that will help you get rid of your line twist, which also then helps prolong the life of your line. It helps you just have better efficiency while fishing. So you want to get rid of your line twist, and there's a lot of little things that you can do to do that, whether you cut the bait off and let the line out. Maybe it's just simply you let your bait untwist while you hold up 10 feet of line. That helps even too. But you want to try to remove the line twist. If you watch my channel on a regular basis, you know line twist doesn't really bother me from a technique standpoint. Like, there's a lot of individuals out there that don't like to use a technique that creates line twists. I have no problem using a technique that creates line twist, because if I feel like that technique is what I need to be doing to catch fish, I'm all for it. But I definitely try to remove the line twist if I can, because it's one of those things that just overall will hinder your performance. The next thing just comes down to when you spool up your reels. I always put backing. Generally speaking, if you've got a spool of line where you know there's not enough line on it to fill up a full spool, a lot of people just throw that away. I'll use that as backing. So the next time I fill up a spool, I'll make sure that probably about a third of the reel is backing line, which I would consider old or used line that I'm not going to use. I'll actually go as far as taking line, if I'm going to respool 2 rods up, I'll take the line that I'm pulling off one reel, use it as backing, and then put new line on top of it. So don't necessarily throw away your old used line. You can definitely use that as backing, but the backing does a couple of things. One, it saves you a bunch of money because you're not going to put as much fresh line on your reel. But 2, it also just allows you to be able to replace your line faster, I guess. Generally speaking, if you're going to fill a whole spool up with fresh line, that first third or even half your spool isn't even useful. So you just go through a lot less line. It allows you to save some money and be more efficient with respect to that. The next thing it has to do with actually checking your guides. You always want to make sure that your guides are in tip-top shape. Sometimes you'll have a rod that loses a ceramic insert, or that ceramic insert can crack, which leads to fraying your line, which leads to breaking fish off. So you definitely want to pay attention to how good the guides are on your rod. If you hear, one of the best tips to finding it, I know people will say you can take like a cotton swab or an ear swab and put it in the guides to find a crack. It's definitely something you can do, but generally speaking, if you have any sort of crack or a chip, or you're missing a ceramic insert, you can hear that. You'll hear the line coming through those guides. It almost has that like sawing sound. It just sounds different. So if something registers in your ears as not performing properly, make sure you pay attention to it. The other, obviously, is if you see your line getting frayed substantially, that's a very good tip as well. But make sure you check your guides. And then the last has to do with your storage of your line. I've got a lot of line that I still use from several years ago because I store it properly. You want to make sure your line is stored in a dry area that doesn't have a whole lot of temperature change, which for me up here in my neck of the woods can be difficult. If you keep a bunch of line, say in my garage, well, it's going to be sub-freezing temperatures for months at a time during the winter, and then in the summer it could be 100 degrees in there. So you definitely want to pay attention to where you store your line. Make sure it's not in a place where it's going to have a lot of major temperature changes. And if you do that, that line will last a long period of time, to the point where you definitely will be able to use it 4, 5, 6 years down the road if you store it properly. But don't overlook your line management. The line itself is probably the most crucial thing on the whole fishing rod. If you've got bad line or it's not in good condition, it's going to cost you more than using a bait that's not functioning, or using a rod that may not be ideal for that technique. The line is one of the most critical things you can do. So take care of it. Make sure you've got it in tip-top shape and you know how to get the best performance out of it. So let me know in the comment section, do you guys have some other line management tips that you can share with the rest of the viewers that they can learn from you guys as well? If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and stay tuned. We'll have a new tip video coming out tomorrow.